Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Basil Considine, and I'm here from the ACU Online Writing Center. And today we're going to look at the Meaning, Vocation, and Self-Leadership assignment. This is a webinar in our EdD in Progress series, which looks at specific assignments and tasks that you'll have to complete as part of the EdD course sequence and dissertation writing. And we're going to be diving right in. If you are new to ACU, we work with students at many different points in the process. We talk about this at the introduction of all of our videos, but because this is about an assignment that's due tonight, we're going to skip right over that and just say you can find information about that on the Writing Center website and other places. We've got lots of webinars coming up, including more in the EdD sequence, as well as our other related programs. And we have a large and growing body, more than 20 specialized webinars about different tasks and assignments that you'll take in the EdD program. So with that, let us dive into our main focus here. So we're going to be talking about a particular synthesis application paper. And so it would be helpful to start with what exactly that is. So a synthesis application paper is something where you have a set of resources, in this case readings, and you are presenting the most relevant details. So big picture, not little granular things. And one of the goals is to show a critical comparison of the sources. Are there common themes? Are there notable differences? How are these important? So for example, if we did, let's say, 3 political polls to pick a topic that's been on many people's minds over the last couple of years, if you do it in different parts of the country, you're going to get very different results. So how do you make sense of the fact that someone in, say, Dallas may have different views of someone in Laramie, Wyoming? And what do you make of that? And so it's not just reporting, it's also having that critical comparison and that analysis when you work between the different things. When you say, okay, so there's this difference, here's what we can attribute to it. Can we exclude it or disclude it, or say that doesn't apply to the situation? And we want to do this before we move on to our specific situation, because once we've arrived at, okay, here are the key elements, the most important details, then we can apply them to the specific task and have a nice focused discussion. Now, this assignment does require that you be referring to a number of resources, and I've looked at a lot of assignments, drafts that have come in for this, so I wanted to make sure that we include an example of how to refer to and cite a YouTube video. So this is one of those that is part of this week's readings. It's in the Leaders In YouTube channel. It's Ken Blanchard talking about self-leadership. And so how would we cite that? Well, if we're referring to the speaker himself, that's Blanchard, but we need the author date citation to reflect the channel name, that's Leaders In, and the date that the video went up onto YouTube, which is 2015. This is an important distinction because sometimes on YouTube, you have a video of an event that was done many years ago, but they've only just put it online. Well, we go with the publication date from when it was put online in that format. So Blanchard, Leaders in 2015, stated that. Or if we're just referring to the information, the facts that are relayed, we say self-examination is key to self-leadership, parentheses, Leaders in 2015. And if you're doing a quote, then usually it's helpful to reference the author by name. Blanchard, again, Leaders in 2015, argued that a key tenet of situational leadership is there is no one best leadership style, parentheses, and then the time stamp, 254 to 256. All right, let us continue through here. And I'll just mention that some of these resources, although there's excellent information and in the course syllabus, in the modules for the readings, if you have another resource and you want to find the information for your reference on it, you can search for it in the ACU library and then use that cite button to get a shorthand for that. And if you are doing an assignment that needs a permalink, not this one, but it comes up in a bunch of other assignments, there's a button for that as well. All right. So let us delve right into that. I know the paper is due this evening, so we're going to waste no time and go right to the point. Now, I encourage questions as we go. I'm going to roll through this quickly with the goal of delivering you with at least 20 minutes free time to go and work on the paper, since I'm sure you want to have it off your plate after the holiday weekend and everything. So, we are going to be talking about Leadership 714, Self Assessment and Leadership, about the Week 1 assignment, Meaning, Vocation, and Self Leadership. So, on the surface, seems to be a fairly straightforward assignment. It says write a 3 to 5 page paper in which you include an introduction, a conclusion, and the following. Synthesis, a section where you briefly synthesize your understanding of the course readings and resources, including media that refers to the videos. And then the application section, where you apply these resources to yourself and to the larger concept of self-leadership. Use the following prompts to jumpstart your thinking. What gives your life meaning? What motivates you? How does vocation or calling connect to self-leadership? And how does mindfulness or curiosity connect to self-leadership? And then the conclusion. Now, there are a number of notes after that you should definitely keep in mind. Remember to support your thoughts from the course readings or resources, demonstrating that you have read and understood what has been written on these topics. You may include other sources familiar to you, but you're not required to. And Bible verses should not be referred to in lieu of the required or recommended scholarly resources, whether we're talking this assignment or other ones. And then you must follow APA citation things. So just a little bit about that wording, because I get questions about that. So in lieu of means in place of. So you don't want to have the sole basis of your argument be scripture, but you are allowed to say, oh, so-and-so says this, which to me aligns with this passage of scripture. That's fine, because in that case it's being used to supplement rather than to replace a scholarly source. So for example, if you were citing Blanchard on a point, and then you said, oh, so here in Paul's letter to Ephesians, there's a similar thing, and so this is how I see my personal faith bridging over into my practice of leadership. Great, that's a wonderful way to combine those and to have a reason to cite those two different types of sources. You just need to remember you can't only cite the Bible in support for this assignment. All right, let's talk about that last note. While discussing these things, there is not an expectation that everyone will view the same way. In other words, you're not required to agree 100% with every author. It is an expectation that your views are discussed through the literature, meaning you talk about what you believe and that you make reference to the literature as you do that, and to demonstrate that you have read and understood what has been written on these topics. So there should be frequent references to the different authors and other sources that you've been using this week. If we look at the syllabus rubric, we find that it's pretty straightforward. 40% is going for synthesis, and 50% is going to the application section, so that should be the largest one. And then 10% is, okay, does this look right? Does it read clearly? Have you written coherent sentences and all that stuff? So let's delve into that synthesis part, because if it's 40% of the grade, that's something you want to make sure you're not losing points on. And we have a lot of people who ask questions about this. And it helps if we break down the argument. The synthesis section is giving an argument. Part of the argument is, have you done the reading? Another part of the argument is, well, here's some important things about self-leadership in the literature, and show that. So you're going to be presenting evidence. This is the factual information. It's going to be through summaries, through paraphrases. Occasionally you might use quotes, but in the synthesis section for a paper of this length, you don't want to use many, if any. You want to have analysis. And this is where people usually start going wrong, because summary is easy. I always see drafts, people are summarizing the literature. But the analysis is when you start comparing and evaluating the different sets of information. So Are the authors all agreeing with each other? Do they have conflicting ideas? Do they make different recommendations? And do they define a term differently? And that's not just pointing out the differences and similarities, but also saying what they mean. So it could be, well, they use a slightly different wording, but it amounts to the same thing. Or it could be, well, they recommend that you not do this until you've done that other thing, and this other author says exactly the opposite. Whatever that should be, you want to point out those differences and commonalities. Now, the synthesis, in its specific sense, synthesis refers to the new meaning that you create from combining the evidence and the analysis and applying these things to new context or purpose. And synthesis is usually indicated by a logical bridge or a phrase like, as a result, this suggests, consequently, this is important because. And these phrases are very important because they can make it clear that you are synthesizing and thus don't need a citation, versus you are relaying someone else's comments and you've forgotten the citation. So make sure that it's clear when you're synthesizing by having wording that shows that. So what goes where? Well, we have 4 sections for this: the introduction and conclusion, not too much trouble with that. But what goes into the section that's marked synthesis and what goes into the section that's marked application? Well, the synthesis section is where you're going to present and analyze the evidence, those summaries of key details from the reading and how they relate to each other. And that's where, in the general sense, what does this mean in not applying to a specific situation, but about self-leadership or self-leadership studies or trends. In that sort of general sense, that's where you do that sort of synthesis. But in the application section, this is where you take whatever conclusions you make in the synthesis section, and now you apply them to yourself. That, again, that's one of those places where you create new meaning by taking the findings from one thing and applying them to a new context or purpose. Like, okay, so that's what it is in general. Let's talk about self-leadership along my career path, for example. And in this section, you want to make sure that you are directly answering each of the 4 questions that's being given. Those are these questions here. What gives your life meaning? What motivates you? How does vocation or calling connect to self-leadership? And how does mindfulness or curiosity connect to that? And once you've given the short answer, then you can explain why these findings or your answers are significant to you. And that's where you're going to make up the bulk of this section. And remember, the application section is going to be around 50% of the points, so it should be the largest section and by a noticeable amount. So this is an opportunity to talk about yourself. At this point, we are going to move into a hands-on section, and I encourage you to ask questions as we go. We are going to be grabbing a copy of the AP course paper template, which you can download from most of your classes and from the Writing Center website. And I'm going to just start talking through going from the assignment instructions to an outline. And if you've already been working on your draft, awesome. This is kind of a check of, do you have all the key components and are they clearly labeled? If you are coming back from vacation and you're writing your paper now, well, we won't take the full time here so that you'll be able to switch gears and focus on that. All right, so when you have the AP course paper template, the first thing you want to do is make sure that you put in the essentials: your name, the class, the title of the assignment. And one of the reasons I say to do that now is because when you are rushing to do something at the last moment, it doesn't always make its way in there. So we want to avoid any, shall we say, unpleasant surprises when you discover you've left out something that's required. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Please let me know if you do not see it. Seems to be a little bit of a lag today. All right, so the first thing I do when I get my copy of the template all set up is I go ahead and I start filling in the details. All right. Now, titles in APA style, they do not need to be flashy. What they should be is accurate and informative. So you could call the synthesis paper, well, that's not very specific, and APA style does emphasize that preciseness and conciseness. So let's just be specific. There is nothing wrong with saying that this is the Meaning, Vocation, and Self Leadership paper. So why not we just put that in here? And of course, my name, and you can fill in your own information there. All right, now we want to lay out the sections of this paper, and we're going to have an introduction, but do not add a heading that says introduction, because there's an APA rule saying don't have a heading called introduction. We know that the start of the paper or of a chapter is the introduction. That's just says it's the first thing. So we're going to put a note, a placeholder there to make sure we add an introduction, but we're not going to add a heading there. Now, so what are the other things that we're required to include here? Well, if we go ahead and we look back at the instructions, we'll find that there's actually a direction on that. So as you can see, part one, synthesis. Now, do you need the part one? Not really. Does it hurt to have it? Not really. But I'm just going to call mine synthesis because that's the important thing here. So I'm going to add a heading. It's going to be called synthesis. And I'm going to go ahead and style it. Now, if you're using the template, you have some things that will help make things look the way they should. So this should be an APA level 1 heading because it's going to be their first heading in the paper. So we apply the APA level 1 style. Just to recap, I was in the home ribbon and I went to the styles pane button, and with the text selected, I selected APA level 1, and you see it bolds and centers. All right, so what else are we going to need here? Well, if we go back and check the instructions here, section 2, application, with those 4 questions. Great. And one of the reasons that you want to have these headings is that you want to make sure that everything that you have is clearly labeled, and so it's immediately clear to your professor that you've put the things that you need to have in these sections. And what else are we going to put in here? Well, any references, we should add those immediately to that section when the time comes along. But let's go ahead and check the notes for what should be in each of these. And it's not bad to just go ahead and start with just taking the notes there. Literally, this is what the instructions say to do, because this gives you a list of what the professor wants to have and suggest wording that you should use to make this clear. All right, now I'm just going to add some hierarchy so it's clear how these relate to each other. And here at this point, you're probably going to start listing some of the key sources that you read. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look up some of the stuff for this course. So if we're talking the key sources here, we want to go ahead and look around in Leadership 714. All right, so I've got that pulled up. And let's take a look at the different sources we have. So let's say that we wanted to cite this Seligman and Csikszentmihalyi source. All right, so first thing we'll do, we'll start with copying and pasting that. Now, whenever you are copying something, whether it's from the library database or from the course website, we want to make sure that it is formatted correctly. So if I just paste, we've got this underlining, the colors don't look right. So go ahead and start with using match destination formatting. And that still doesn't look quite right, so I'm going to use keep text only. And now I can just go in and quickly add the italics. And I look at it and say, oh, I need a period at the end. And in APA style, you should have an N dash, which is slightly longer than the hyphen that was there originally. All right, so now I'm going to be citing these authors here. And so I can start putting it together here. All right. And then I want my date there, so that was 2000. Say okay. And so even if I'm going to go in and fill in some of these details later with more specifics, I know that I'm talking about that source and I have enough to, oh yeah, that's a positive psychology one. So I'm not having to cross-reference everything. I'm giving myself enough notes to refer back to it easily. Now, let's see that I'm also going to be citing Alan Langer's video on mindfulness in leaders. Okay. So I'm opening up this video on YouTube, and let's see what information is going to go here. Well, there are a couple things we want to keep in mind here. First is, what is the channel? Because it's not the author who's speaking who gets credit as the quote-unquote author here. It is the channel name under which it is posted, which in this case is Schwartz Media. So what's that going to be looking like? Well, that's going to be going before Seligman here. So Schwartz Media. And I look at the publication date here, and it says May 3rd, 2013. So that goes in as well. And notably for a YouTube video, we include that information. whereas with the journal article, we just include the year there. All right. Now, what's going to be the title here? It's going to be whatever's in the title field here, which in this case is Mindfulness and Leadership, Ellen Langer. All right. That looks a little bit different from how a journal article title would normally go, but that's fine. We are reporting accurately. And that's going to actually be italicized. And then at the end, we have in square brackets, but not italicized, video, period, the name of the platform, which is YouTube. And then we just need a link there. And so now up in my notes here, I'm going to now add a placeholder, and we're going to refer to Ellen Langer using her last name. Because in APA style, we don't use pronouns to refer to authors. We leave their gender out of it unless it's specifically relevant, and in almost all cases, it's just not relevant to the argument at hand. So, all right, Langer, and then this is going to be Schwartz Media, comma, 2013. And then and so you assemble your notes here, and then you start comparing them. And you can add a note like this. Oh, mindfulness and positive psychology are compatible concepts. Now, is this going to be something where another author has pointed this out, or is this going to be my own insight? If it's some other author has pointed this out, of course, we put a citation there. If it's my own insight, there are some ways that you can show this through logical bridges and things like this. For example, if you're indicating this is your analysis, and then the key phrasing, which suggests that these are. So this lets us know, okay, so you're taking that information from earlier and you're analyzing it and saying, okay, so they're not that different, which suggests that we can do this other thing with it. So this part is analysis, that very similar, and then which suggests that that's telling us, oh, this is synthesizing it. Now, there's another step because we can come back to this in the application section and say, oh, okay. So it's not just in general, but for me specifically, I plan to implement Langer's and then put in the citation. And then tell us more about the context and any other particulars there. And there will be. So I did promise that I would be finishing this early so that anyone who's still working on the assignment can focus on that. Make sure that you have clear connections, that you use the wording of the prompts. And I'll say, welcome back. Hope you had a great holiday weekend and good writing. We are going to be wrapping up the webinar there, and I hope to see you down the line. So